Thank you, Professor Sugioka, for your very kind introduction, and good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Maxime Chambonneau, working at the Institute of Applied Physics in Jena, Germany. And today I'm going to talk about laser-silicon interaction, especially at 2-micron wavelength. So, well, I guess that's a secret for no one here that femtosecond lasers represent an extraordinary tool for functionalizing dielectric materials, right? And the reason is simple, like with such ultra-short laser pulses, it is possible to separate the causes, which are the absorption of photon, from the consequences, which is the material response, right? And so after thermostructural events and resolidification, it is possible to induce different types of modifications, including different refractive index variations. And this allows us to address many, many applications, of course in optics, so in waveguide inscription, second harmonic generation in glasses, fiber optics, but also for micropositioning and micromechanics, as you can see here, microfluidics and lab-on-a-chip applications, and finally data storage. So if one could simply transpose these to silicon, then this would open a new avenue for, an extension of these applications. Namely, I'm speaking about the monolithic integration of circuits mixing photonics and electronics, or step dicing, as you can see here, so for cleaving in a clean way some silicon wafers. So why not doing it? I mean, that's pretty simple, right? You just have to replace your glass sample or dielectric material sample by a silicon wafer, then tune a little bit the wavelength. Well, the story is a little bit more complicated for semiconductors and silicon especially. The fact is, it is not possible, or it is extremely challenging to modify the bulk of the material. Well, don't get me wrong. Of course, it's possible to excite the material and produce a plasma, but this plasma is still underdense and thus transient. Well, the reason for this is the nonlinear phenomena taking place during the interaction, during the propagation. Well, this is due to the competition between Kerr effect on the one hand and plasma defocusing on the other hand. And as you can see here, whatever the input energy you have, the electron density is clamped below the critical density level. Of course, people have found some ways to bypass those limitations, either by using a spherical interface, but this is not directly applicable for the industry, right? Or using longer pulses, so either in the nanosecond or the picosecond regime, but then the price to pay is that you lose some degree of control for the modification you produce. So why today we will try to see what's going on at 2 microns? Well, first, most of the studies have been conducted at telecom wavelengths, so 1.3, 1.55, and there are more and more mid-infrared lasers with microjoule pulses, so namely thulium or holmium doped. Then an arising question is like, is 2 micron wavelength beneficial or detrimental for writing inside silicon? So we got to put in balance different mechanisms. And especially for silicon, at 2 micron, as you can see here, there is a peak of the nonlinear refractive index at 2 micron. And theoretically, this produces a higher electron density. And finally, it would enable us also to explore narrower bandgap materials in the future, like germanium, for instance, which is transparent for wavelengths above 1.9 micron. So the questions I will try to answer today are the following ones. So how about the energy delocalization phenomenon at 2 micron? Is it occurring? How strong it is? And so on. Then what would be the temporal scaling law for modifying the material? Is it even possible to initiate some modifications in the material at this wavelength and eventually make them grow? And finally, is it possible to write transversal, lines in a transversal way? So to answer all of these questions, we have developed an experimental setup in Jena based on, this relies on pulses around 2 micron wavelength with a pulse duration tunable from 275 femtosecond up to 20 picosecond. Then we control the energy with a half-wave plate and the polarizer and simply focus it inside the material with an A-sphere. Besides, we have 2 microscopes. The first one works in reflection and enables us to position the focus with respect to the sample surface. And we have another microscope working in transmission this time, based on an objective lens and an InGaAs array, which enables us to see what's going on inside the material. So, concerning the energy delocalization at this wavelength, this is, here on the top right image is a typical image we can record for pulses at 2 micron and 275 femtosecond, right? So the way I will present you the results is the following one. I will just divide this plasma image by a reference image, T0, and then take the log of this ratio. So hopefully the video will work. And here we will investigate this plasma luminescence at different pulse energies. And what you can see here is that there is plasma luminescence, and it's even stronger when you increase the pulse energy, right? But there are several other features that I will discuss now. So these are exactly the same results, basically, for different pulse energies. Well, what we see is that the higher the energy, the stronger the signal. This means that more free carriers have recombined, and then the absorption is way higher, or at least was higher. Well, the question is then, but where is located this absorption? What we can see here with the green arrows, and here it's easier to view. So this is the focal shift as a function of the input energy, and what we can see here is that there is a clear change in the focal position up to above 100 microns upstream towards the laser flux. So this whole set of results demonstrate that, of course, there is soliton propagation, so Kerr effect against plasma defocusing, but there is also a strong delocalization of the energy in the prefocal region. So now, how about the temporal scaling laws for laser-induced modification at 2 micron? Well, to answer this, we have carried out a few more experiments. So here, of course, you cannot see the y-axis. This is the modification probability defined as follows, as a function of the pulse duration. And what you can see here is that the longer the pulse is, the higher the probability to modify the material. And this behavior here is kind of surprising, right? Like, normally in dielectrics, you would expect that for a given pulse energy, so here, sorry, the pulse energy was fixed to 8.1 microjoule. And in dielectrics, you would expect that for a given pulse energy, the shorter the pulse is, the higher the damage probability, right? So to investigate why, we have carried out some simulations based on the resolution of the nonlinear Schrödinger equations coupled to the kinetic equation for plasma concentration. And what you can see here, so the simulation results. So this is the calculated maximum peak fluence as a function of the pulse duration. And what you can see here is that the longer the pulse is, the higher the fluence inside the material, which is completely correlated with what you see here in terms of experiments. And this can be simply explained by the fact that the longer the pulses, the more reduced are the nonlinearities during the propagation. But how about now the morphology of the single-shot modifications in bulk silicon? Well, these are typical images made in a plane containing the wave vector and in a plane containing, a plane perpendicular to this to this vector. Concerning this, we can see that the single-shot modification morphology is, it consists in a bunch of several microspheres, right? And to go further in the comprehension, we have characterized these modifications in amplitude, of course, but also in phase, with a phase microscope depicted here. I will not enter the details, but this is basically a Mach-Zehnder interferometer, but transposed to the infrared. And what we can see from this phase image is that the phase shift is positive. Yeah, sure, you don't see the scale, so you have to trust me. Well, the phase shift is then positive, and the calculated delta n value is around 10 to the minus 3 for each microspheres. And we can interpret this as the formation of either amorphous or polycrystalline silicon and or strong stress fields created inside the material. And the fact that we have a positive refractive index change means that it's applicable directly for writing waveguides in the future, as well as microlenses and so on. Okay, we can of course make we can initiate the modification, but it is possible as well to make them grow, as you can see here. So these are the experimental image, and these are the measurements of the length of the modifications along all directions. And what you can see here is that it's possible to make them grow logarithmically in all directions. How can we interpret this? So we interpret this as this. So during one pulse, the material is strongly absorbed by the region which has been already modified by the preceding pulse. And applying this from one pulse to another, it's possible to elongate the structures. Interestingly, you can see here that for more than 30 pulses, we can see the formation of a tail upstream towards the laser flux, which suggests the importance of the spherical aberrations inside the material during the growth. Okay, we can initiate modifications, make them grow at 2 micron. Then is it possible to inscribe transversal lines? Well, the question may seem stupid if you work in dielectrics, right? Well, the fact is, so far in silicon, only exit surface seeded lines can be inscribed can be inscribed longitudinally. So as you will see here, basically we just focus the beam on the exit surface, then move the focusing objective lens or any focusing lens upstream towards the laser flux, and we are able to write nice longitudinal lines. So here at 2 microns, we have performed the first inscription of transversal lines, as you can see here. So here we are inside the material, and we displaced the sample perpendicularly with respect to the beam direction. Of course, the lines we produce are pulse overlap dependent. Here you can see that if the pulses are too separated, then we have basically a discrete morphology consisting in a line of single shot damage. When the scanning speed is intermediate, We have a continuous morphology, and when we go to a very strong pulse overlap, so low separation, we have an accumulation morphology related to the growth I presented beforehand. And both of these have a high potential for either refractive index engineering as well as step dicing. So to summarize, we have first studied the plasma luminescence at 2 micron wavelength, which demonstrated the soliton propagation at this wavelength. Then we have studied the temporal scaling laws and observed that the longer the pulse is, the higher the modification probability due to reduced nonlinearities. Concerning the single pulse initiation, it is possible to initiate microspheres with a positive refractive index change above 10 to the minus 3. In the multipulse regime, it is possible to make the modification grow logarithmically. And it's even possible to create transversal lines depending on the pulse overlap. Transversal lines with a morphology depending on the pulse overlap. And to go further in the comprehension, we will carry out spectral measurements of the plasma luminescence, then simulations of the LUT propagation at 2 micron, and finally delta N measurements for the lines we have written in order to see if they are applicable for waveguide writing or step dicing or both. And this leads me to my conclusion. So just a bit of advertisement before thanking you. So we have open positions in Jena, Germany. So if you are interested, or if you know people that are interested, please contact these people. And finally, I'd like to thank you all for your attention.